Hello again, Misfits, and welcome to another 1-minute review. And this time we're taking a look at Everdell Farshore, top secret game sent to us from Starling Games. We were super stoked to hear about this. There's probably not a lot of stuff out on it yet because this is kind of early, and this is going to be out, I believe, maybe around Gen Con time. But this is a new game in the Everdell series. Now you're like, okay, Everdell, yeah, it's another expansion. No, this is a brand new game that has nothing to do with the prior ones. It does not integrate. It's not an expansion. It's not an add-on. It's nothing. Essentially, I'd like to call it kind of like Everdell 2.0 because there are a lot of similarities, and I'll touch on them as we play the game, or I should say as I review the game. We just played it not long ago. So I'll touch on the similarities on that and exactly what makes this kind of 2.0 or 1.5, whatever. It's very similar, but also very different in a lot of good ways. So first off, for Everdell, of course, component-wise, you can always expect great stuff from them, top-notch stuff. Now they always give you, these awesome, high-end bits and bobs for resources. You don't get cardboard resources. You get actual shaped wood tokens here, and seaweed, and gems, and squishy mushrooms, and everything, which are counterpart to the original Everdell game with the stones and everything else. You have a very similar, of course, standee here. In the prior one you had your tree, and this one you have a lighthouse because this is based on like the shoreline of Everdell, kind of like the outskirts. They call it the, actually, what is the name of it again? The far edge of the map. That was it. Edge of the map series. So they're kind of trying to reach out to the different corners of Everdell, story-wise and game-wise. You have your little boats here, complete with little animals that go in them. They basically go on here, and this plays a mechanical part in the game. It's not just for show. So components, as always, great. Similar kind of board. Same kind of card stock. Everything is great. Awesome. Oh, and I love these pearlescent shells. These are actually extra points you can achieve during the game. They weren't really in the original. And they're actually extra points. They count as points because everything point-based is based on like a seashell icon. So component-wise, it's great. Now, like Everdell, it kind of hits for every audience. Young, old. The game mechanics, also not super complicated, but also deep. You get a lot of combos, you get a lot of card interactions that occur, so you can kind of go down the rabbit hole when you play and set up all these cool combos. But for younger people and people, that are not as deep into these things, you can have a great time and still win and just play kind of however you want and not have to worry about like getting crazy combos off and things like that. So like exactly like original Everdell, it's a great game for pretty much everybody. So I'll go into what makes this game different and from the original Everdell and touch upon it a little bit. Now, if you haven't played Everdell, and honestly there's a lot of people who haven't at this point, it's a card-based game, but it's mainly worker placement, resource management as well. You basically take your little animal workers, you go on different parts of the map, you get resources in the form of these right here. You have your wood, your seaweed, your sea stones, and your mushrooms here. And you use those to basically put out cards from your hand and from a tableau here that's available to everybody. And all the animals cost mushrooms. All the buildings cost any of these three, usually all three, to put out. And all the cards are based on either critters, which are your characters, or construction, which are your buildings. And you lay them out in a foundation, and you have basically 15 cards you can put out total, and then your town's full. The cards will trigger things, get you free cards, get you resources, trigger off each other, give you more locations to go to because the locations are limited. And that's really kind of the main interaction with other people in the game. You put it down on a spot, nobody else can go there until you get your thing back. One unique thing to Everdell as well in this is the seasons don't, or I should say rounds, don't really stop play. Like someone will go through, run out of workers, and instead of letting everybody else run out of workers and then reset, you basically reset on your own pace and keep going, and everybody else could be in the prior season or round. And so you kind of play at your own pace a little bit. You don't have to wait for everybody. It doesn't stall things. It kind of keeps things moving instead of having to wait somebody who might have 2 or 3 more actions and everybody's kind of waiting for them to finish their thing. So the gameplay is never really boring. There isn't really a lot of downtime per se outside of waiting for people to do their thing. And it is a ton of fun. It is a ton of fun getting the resources, putting them out, and playing your cards. Now, what differs from this one and what makes this Everdell 1.5, like I said before, is that they fixed, or I shouldn't say really fixed, but changed some of the mechanics, added a few things, and made things a little bit fair. Now, in the prior one, you had buildings that you'd build, and it would give you a free critter. It would usually sit in the right corner, and you build the building, and if the critter came out, or if you had it, or drew it, or whatever, you'd be able to put the critter out for absolutely free. Now, this is a really cool mechanic, and I really liked it a lot. The problem with this mechanic, and it's unfair to say perhaps problem, but randomity is a factor in this game. Obviously, your card pool is random. If somebody got some buildings that had free critters that were available, and I've played games like this where you would have 3 or 4 things and you got a bunch of free critters because they were out, whereas other people did not. They would put out buildings and didn't have free critters available, or didn't get a hold of those buildings that had free critters, or they had, like I said, the free critters didn't show up for them. You were kind of getting almost an early lead a little bit. Not that there is necessarily anything groundbreaking with that, or game breaking, I should say, but it did factor into randomity a lot, because you were getting free stuff and other people weren't. They were forced to kind of, they were a little behind at that point. So in this, they changed it up. You get these anchors instead. Everybody gets 3 of them, and also made out of metal. Very awesome. And basically, everybody gets 3 of these to use during the game. Only 3. You never get them back. And everybody can put them on basically any of their buildings, and play a critter for free that match that building type. So if you have, let's say, a green building, or construction, I should say, you put an anchor on it, you get to play a green critter for free from your hand or from the bay, the tableau. And everybody got that. So it kind of fixed the randomity aspect in a lot of ways, because it didn't matter what building you had with a free critter or if the free critter was at. As long as you had a building and a critter that matched that type, which, mind you, sometimes you might not, but more often than not you did, or one would come out pretty quick, you get to put out a free critter. And everybody had that opportunity. So that fixed kind of the disparity with the luck in the first game. Everybody had a free chance to get a critter. Everybody had the opportunity to get it, and it was just equal. So that fixed that kind of issue with that. And some of the other mechanics added on is they added random locations. These are the form of these little islands, which they kind of go away about halfway through the game. But it added a nice bit of randomity outside of the regular locations that were not in the base game for Everdell. And these just added something basically for people to fight over. They gave you better resources, but of course it was first come, first serve. And they were randomized every game, so you never knew what you got. A nice thing that I liked about it a lot was one of the new mechanics was obviously the sailboats. You see these sailboats over here? You have these what's called winds of change, and these tokens would flip over, and they were random every round. And as long as you played a card that matched one or both of these things, your boat would move along this track. That's very important, because it kind of forces you, or maybe tempts you to kind of go in a certain direction with your build of your city to kind of tailor to these. It kind of helps it along. Because the boats are important. The boats give you a lot of points. They give you a lot of points. It's 2 points every time you move it, up until about, I think, 40. So you're getting a ton of points. Also along the way, as you go along, you get these treasure tokens. These treasure tokens are 2 points if you hold on to the end of the game. Alternatively, you could trade them in at any point for a wild resource, basically any resource you want, giving you incentive to hold on to them. But if you need them in a pinch, if you need to get a resource out in a pinch, you could spend them and get rid of them. But you also get those going along this track. So they heavily incentivize you to follow these winds of change. And Misfit Dawn had a good time. Like, she was like, I should move my boat, probably get along. And people, you kind of pick up along that. That becomes a very important thing very quickly as you go along. And that's a really cool mechanic, because it just kind of tailors, it gives you a little bonus to kind of tailoring along how the game wants you to play. And last but not least, instead of objectives, you have these maps. Now, the maps are a little more simpler than the objectives, which I kind of appreciated. Basically, they were all for just building a certain type, or multiples of a certain type. So each one of these maps basically had the symbols on them, usually 3 of the symbol, I think 2 for the tougher one, the end of game scoring one. And basically, once you got that map, it would be extra points in the game based on how many maps you had in your collection. So it incentivized you to get maybe a bunch of different maps. There's also one that had you for building one of each type. So it rewarded you maybe for following a certain path or a plan for, a certain type of interaction by building all maybe end game stuff, get all that. So instead of having maybe a very, very specific thing with the objectives, it was kind of a little loosey-goosey, a little bit easier to get. And that was, I mean, all of that basically made the game smoother. It made the game less unfair for randomness, in my opinion. And just overall, just the game flowed really, really well. Again, Everdell 1.5, if you want to call it. So that's not to say that the base Everdell isn't worth playing. Very much so. It's just I feel this is just a better, improved game upon the base one, which was, for all intents and purposes, I believe, their intent. Because now they can build upon this and kind of move forward. Now, Everdell, the one thing I will say, of course, obviously this is the first game and it doesn't interact with the other one. you're going to run through it and know everything pretty quickly. They're going to want expansions. That's the one thing base Everdell certainly has over this is you have a lot of different expansions making a different gameplay experience. So you're going to bust out the original with whatever expansion you prefer. There's like 5 of them now, and have trains and have bad guys and stuff, and that exceeds upon this. But this is a perfect product. I think this is great. It's kind of a restart, almost not really a restart per se, but almost it feels almost like it for Everdell. They could build upon this with other expansions, have different themes, ocean themes. I could see a whole ocean add-on board with different boats going out, maybe exploring different islands, things like that. You have a whole other area to kind of work with and another theme and more mechanics to add on with a base game that I feel is a bit more streamlined, a little bit better than the original Everdell because they built upon that. Awesome game. Awesome game. Definitely. I mean, honestly, I give it a 5. I give it a 5 out of 5 salt meter. I mean, Everdell is one of those games that's very endearing, and everybody has it. Everybody's played it. You go to any con, you'll see the giant tree. It's just one of those games that stand the test of time, and this just takes it and raises it up a notch. There's component wise, it's perfect. It's not overproduced. It's not underproduced. The gameplay, the cuteness factor of it, everything. It's just absolutely one of those games that just kind of hit every notch. That's not to say I don't have a couple of minor criticism, and these are very minor, but it's just on my part. So I'm used to the giant Everdell tree. If you see here, the giant tree. Granted, it was cardboard. It kind of get a little loosey-goosey after a while, but it was great because you had your giant boughs here and you could put your animals on. The lighthouse, I love the look of the lighthouse. However, my only complaint is I really wish they made these areas to put now. Granted, they say you can put them wherever you want, and you don't really have to put them up here, but that was kind of a cute little thing with the original. This lighthouse is kind of almost too small. Like, I felt like the round bases or whatever should have been just a little bit larger so you could put our animals on. Because frequently, how many times have we knocked the animals over, Don?
Last night it was pretty often.
Yeah, it was pretty often because if you even breathed at it funny,
just bump it.
Just bump it. Yeah. Boom, done. Luchenko. Oh my God, no. So that wasn't included with the whole thing. But yes, basically it was a little too easy to breathe wrong and knock all these off. So that's really my only complaint about and honestly, it would look more impressive if you had kind of a slightly bigger tower, like as big as maybe a little bit bigger than this. Wouldn't have been like a huge change or anything like that.
Or just bigger rings.
Or just bigger rings, even just bigger rings. That's probably my really only complaint outside of maybe the only thing I will say is the boats are really big, like you wanted to sail them, but you really can't. You kind of have to put them sideways because otherwise you can kind of confuse where they're at point-wise. So you kind of have to put them sideways. And then you have to have like other boats there, so it's like you kind of have to like line them up, almost like a weird lineup. Like thematically, I think it would have been kind of cool. But the only problem is I don't know really a way to fix that because I like the animals being in the boats. Maybe made them a little smaller perhaps, but then visually they're not as impressive. So I really don't know how you can kind of change that. But I was like, oh, okay, well we kind of have to drive them sideways like this. Very, very minor, very, very, very minor complaints. No impact on gameplay or anything like that.
Not enough to lose a Mr. Salty over.
Not enough to lose a Mr. Salty over, but, I always try to be fair and say, okay, well, this would have been kind of cool if it was a big-ass, pardon my French, a big lighthouse. Yeah, add an actual light in there, sure, we could go crazy or whatever, but then, overproduced. So, overall, guys, awesome game. This should be out, I believe at Gen Con, they're going to be starting spin. So we weren't even allowed to talk about this until the time you see this video. Which I think at this time we're probably at Dice Tower now, right? Something like that. So hopefully you guys check this out. I'll be hauling this everywhere I go and showing people. This game is just awesome, guys.
Yeah, if you're at Dice Tower right now and watching this.
Yeah, I'm going to take this to Dice Tower. If you're watching this right now, come and check us out. We're probably demoing this somewhere or having fun with it. So thanks, guys, again for joining me for way longer than 1 minute review. I think this is my longest review yet, probably, I want to say.
Because it was so much fun to play.
Good, because it was, you're not wrong. It was a lot of fun to play. This game's going to come out a lot, guys. Definitely get it when it comes out. Hopefully you get it at Gen Con, maybe later. Otherwise, of course, as always, guys, don't forget, game on.